Hi there, 6th graders. This short video is going to be about how to subtract integers, lesson 5.3, but first let's do a quick review of how to add integers, which was lesson 5.2. I'm going to show you the number line method, which to me is less preferable than another method, which we'll review as we move into the video. But with a number line, you can start at the first add-in, positive 5, and if the second add-in is positive, you move that far to the right. So if I start at 5, and go over 1, 2, I arrive at 7, which is the answer. Following the procedure, if I start at negative 5 and add negative 2, when I add a negative number, I move to the left, 1, 2, and arrive at negative 7. So this answer is negative 7. To do negative 5 plus 2, I start at negative 5, and because the second add-in is positive, I move to the right that many spaces. 1, 2, this would be negative 3. If I start at 5 and go to the left, I arrive at positive 3. Now, one of the obvious limitations of this method is if you have 539 plus negative 764, you do not want to have to do that on a number line, obviously. So, you don't want to do the second method on a number line either. But I think it leads to an understanding of how you actually do the algorithm for adding integers. This problem, 5 plus 2, we can say 5 can be represented with 5 plus signs, or positive signs, and 2 can be represented with 2 positive signs, for a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 positives. We can do the negative 5 plus negative 2, it's 5 negatives, and 2 more negatives makes 7 negatives. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, for a little trickier problem, negative 5 and positive 2, that would be 5 negatives and 2 positives. Let this represent a negative 1, and this would be a positive 1. They're opposite numbers. Negative 1 and positive 1 are opposites, and you know the sum of two opposites is always 0. So this is 0, this is 0, and what's left is the answer, which would be, that's right, you think it before I say it. What you're thinking, negative 3. 1, 2, 3. 3 negatives. If I do negative 5, I just said that. If positive 5 plus negative 2, those are zeros, and the answer is positive 3. 1, 2, 3. Obviously, again, limited because you don't want to be drawing thousands of positive signs and hundreds of negative signs and counting the difference. So, what it comes down to is we have a problem like this. Negative 24 plus, and you often put parentheses, negative 16. If you're adding two negative numbers, you always get a negative answer. So this would be like, your basketball team is behind by 24 points, and the other team scores the next 16 points, putting you further in the hole by 16 for a total of 40. You're down 40, negative 40. Or if it's 24 degrees below 0 and the temperature drops another 16 degrees, it's now 40 below 0, or negative 40. I don't think you need to see the positives. Obviously, if it was 24 plus 16, it would be positive 40. But what if it's negative 24 plus positive 16? Well, you have 24 negatives and 16 positives. Which do you have more of? I'm thinking, wait, okay, there were 16 of these and 24 of these. There's more of these. There's 24 more negatives. There's 24 negatives. And how many more would that be? Well, it would be actually the difference between 24 and 16. So there's 8 more negatives. So the answer would be negative 8. If we switch it around and have 24 positives and 16 negatives, now you have more positives than you do negatives. How many more positives do you have? 8. So it's positive 8. So that's a quick review of addition. The main topic for this video is subtraction. Subtraction is the difference between two numbers. So if we wanted to do We'll start with a really easy one, 8 minus 5. You can start with, this is called the minuend. I won't even use that term. You start with the first number. And then if it's, you identify you got 8 here and 5 here, and how far apart are they? 1, 2, 3. Well, that tells you the answer is, the absolute value for sure, the answer is 3. And just from your experience, you know that's positive 3. Another way you could do that, actually probably more. Yeah, this is just a different way of thinking about it. If you start at 8 and take away 5, you can start at 8 and count back 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you arrive at 3. And using that method, what would we do if we did 5 minus 8? That would mean you start at 5 and count back 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And you arrive at negative 3. Okay, that's pretty obvious to you. If the temperature is 5 degrees above 0 and it drops 8 degrees, it's now 3 below 0. If you had a harder one, would be like negative 3 minus 2. Well, here's a positive 2 and here's a negative 3, and you can just kind of figure out how far apart they are. They are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 apart. And then to figure out, is that answer going to be a positive or a negative 5? And if you start at negative, it's kind of the reverse of what you do when you do addition, but if you start at the first number and find yourself counting to the right, that indicates your answer is going to be negative. Number line is not a great way to do this. It's figuring out the absolute value of the answer is pretty simple. Figuring out whether the answer is positive or negative is a little more complicated. And so I don't really advise you using a number line to do these problems, but to help you understand sort of how subtraction is different than addition, number line is helpful, because subtraction is the difference between two numbers. So just picking these two numbers out, negative 4 and 6, they're 10 apart. So if you have 6 minus negative 4, the answer is going to be positive 10. If it's negative 4 minus 6, the answer is going to be negative 10. Don't worry too much about that. I'll show you an easier way to figure out whether the answer is positive or negative. We had a situation where you were standing up on a hill that was 500 feet above sea level. You think positive 500. And you're looking down in a valley. Your sea level, 0. It would have that numerical value, 0. And so there's a valley, and there's a farmer down there doing his farm work, and he's actually, let's say, 30 feet below sea level, negative 30. So how far is it from positive 500 to negative 30? What's the difference between the two numbers? What is the difference between 500 and negative 30? What would be this value? It would be represented as the difference between positive 500 and negative 30. We pictures 530. It's going to be, go from here to 0, that's 30, and another 500 makes 530. So basically, this problem is the same answer as 500 plus 30. It's the same thing. And that leads to a definition of subtraction that can be very helpful. And the procedure is going to be change every subtraction problem to an addition problem, and then just follow the rules for addition. And algebraically, it looks like this. If you have a number, minus b, where these are integers, they can be both positive, both negative, or one can be positive and one can be negative. You can make that a, don't change the first number, whatever value it has, it's negative 3, it's still negative 3. Make this addition, and then take the opposite of b. So if b is negative, make it positive. If b is positive, make it negative. And this should be in your notes, it should be in your head. That a minus b is the same answer as a plus the opposite of b. So we need to erase this. So why are we doing this? We can make any subtraction problem an addition problem. Now, if the subtraction problem you have is very simple for you to look at and say, I know 16 minus 10 is 6. Then you don't need to change it to an addition problem. Why would you want to do that? But if you had a problem that was 10 minus 16, you might hesitate on that one a little bit. It's not a real complicated subtraction problem. You probably would realize, hopefully you realize that if both numbers are positive, and you're subtracting a larger positive number from a smaller positive number, the answer is negative, and it's going to be negative 6. But you could make this, it'll be right here, 10 minus 16, according to this, what we call the algebraic definition of subtraction, it's the same as 10 plus, now think about what is the opposite of 16? Negative 16. Now think about the rules for adding. When the signs of the numbers you're adding are not the same, you have to ask which one is farther from 0? Which of these numbers has a larger absolute value? I've got more of them than I do of the other type of number. This is a positive number, this is a negative number, there's more negatives. So the answer will definitely be a negative answer. And to find the value, the absolute value of that number, you just find the difference between 16 and 10, which is 6. Negative 6 would be the answer to 10 minus 16. Again, that probably is not, this probably is not a real confusing kind of subtraction problem for you. And you could probably solve it with intuition. This rule up here, because this is sort of the big idea of this lesson. But what if you had negative 4 minus 7? Go ahead and predict the answer. I'll give you a few seconds to try to figure out. You can pause the video if you want to, if you need a little more time to think about it. Well, the difference between, if you can envision a number line, the difference between a negative 4 and a positive 7, think about how far that is. How far is it from negative 4 to 0, and then from 0 to 7, and add those two numbers together. It tells you how far apart they are. So we got 11. Okay, that's the absolute value there. You got to figure out whether it's positive or negative 11. All you need to do is make this plus negative 7. So you have 4 negatives and then 7 more negatives. If you think about, and you don't have to write this out, but if you just think about 4 negatives and 7 more, you got a total of 11. 11 what's? Negatives. So the original problem was negative 4 minus 7. We made that negative 4 plus the opposite of 7, and that's negative 11. Or what if we were subtracting two negatives from each other? Negative 16 minus negative 25. And I put these parentheses here, they're not absolutely necessary, but they're highly recommended to subtract the minus sign, which we could call the symbol of the operation, from the sign of the number, which is often just raised a little bit, like this when you do it, when you're using pencil and paper to do it. In your book, you're not going to see that because they don't have many books don't have the technology in their word processing to raise that negative symbol up a little bit higher. Okay, how far apart are these numbers? They're apart by 9 because negative 16 would be here, negative 25 would be here, and here somewhere is 0. These are 9 apart. So the absolute value of the answer will be 9, and then you have to figure out, well, is it positive or negative 9? Well, this will help you. You make it plus positive 25. So is it positive 9 or negative 9? Ask what you have more of. You have more positives or more negatives? Positives. So that would be positive 9. So negative 16 plus 25 is 9. If you can add, you can subtract. You're going to have trouble subtracting if you can't add, because we're going to make almost every subtraction problem an addition problem. And that's the main focus and the big idea of lesson 5.3. Thanks.